Good afternoon. Thank you to the Sydney Mining Club for having me here this afternoon. Members, guests, honoured members, I don't see any. Did I say that wrong? I see some alumni over there. Welcome to those guys. I'm a University of New South Wales product. It was back in the dark ages of the 70s, early 80s. I'm here to talk to you about Tiger, but today I'm going to talk a little bit broader than just Tiger Resources. Can everyone hear me all right? Speak up a bit? Okay. Okay, so today I'm going to be talking about the potential within Africa, the mineral resources, the yet to be discovered and explored potential there, and I'm going to use Tiger Resources as a showcase of what can be done. Is that too loud? No? Good. All right, let's get on with it. Okay. Normal statement, cautionary note. Okay. In Africa, Australia has over 1,100 companies represented. Over 10% of the ASX listed companies are actually active in Africa. As you can see from this plate, we've touched the edges and down the south, a little bit in the north, probably not so good at the moment, but the Sahara is pretty much untouched. I've been working in Africa for 25 years, from the far west down below Timbuktu in the Fulani River is born in the Badlands of Mali, flows down across into a mineral field where there's now Randgold is exploiting 11 million ounces, through Ghana, across all the way into southern Kenya, Magadi Soda, the only renewable deposit that I have worked on. The Rift Valley flows up with this liquid filled with bicarbonates, and that carbonate crystallises at the surface, and dredgers mine that out and turn it into potash. Yeah, my first love affair. I went into Zimbabwe back in 1985. Frida Rebecca, the name of the two daughters of the managing director of the company Clough. The deposit was truly outstanding. Not a world-class deposit by today's standard, but whole ore, heap leaching in gold. Then CIL processing, and this is Zimbabwe. The mine was opened in 1987 by Margaret Thatcher and Mugabe. It still operates today. It's an underground mine and is going, from what I understand, quite profitably. You're looking at the fingers of God there, the rays of light from the Sahara dust that flows down onto the land just before the start of the wet season as you get the build-up. That hill that you're looking at there is actually an outcrop of the mineralisation. From there I went into Ghana. Ghana, as we're probably all aware, is known for its gold, was indeed called the Gold Coast. The discoveries have been nothing short of meteoric. Myself, I've been involved with the discovery in excess of 20 million ounces of gold. Excuse me. Air travel, it gets to all of us occasionally. My most recent sojourn was in 2000, where I was working on the Sefwi Belt, and in a 3-year period we drilled off a deposit along a 52-kilometre structure that contained over 19 million ounces at the end of it, taking it from 500,000 ounces in 3 years. 19 rigs pushed hard over 3 years to that deposit. It's probably known as the Akim now, inside of the Newmont State. The DRC. Yeah. So, during the 1980s and 1990s, a very unstable place, a very dangerous place. Lots of people were killed. In fact, post-Second World War, the maximum number of people in any one conflict killed in the world. A terrible time. My meet and greet officer, Ustash, he comes from Goma. That's in the heartland of the difficult territory. Wife, 2 children. Children are 2 and 4 years old. He walked 1,500 kilometres over 5 years to get down into the safe territory called Katanga. He walked past 1 million dead people. In 2001, saw Kabila come in. He's called the peacemaker. Kabila has brought prosperity, wealth and opportunity for the youth of the country. Ustash says all he's looking for is better education and opportunity for his children. Isn't that what we all seek? Okay. The DRC recently declared, in fact I think this morning there was an article in Bloomberg saying that it's now producing in excess of 1 million tonnes of copper. That's a pretty incredible development for a country that's only just been created as an independent nation state in 2001, democratically elected government in 2006, repetition with increased margin for the President in 2012. Stable government has led to development in the mining sector. The deposits within the copper belt, 2.5% to 5%. I'm sure all of you are aware that the average grade of copper mined in the world today is around 0.75%. These deposits are present at surface. They're not underground. Lower cost to develop. These deposits have very low reagent consumptions, and you find yourself in a jurisdiction where the availability of electricity is somewhat questioned, but where it's available, it's at a cost of sub 6 cents. There is a power solution, and it comes from the 2nd biggest river in the world. There's a gorge below below Kinshasa called the Inga Gorge. This is a river where there is a capacity of run-of-river supply of over 200 gigawatts of hydroelectricity, enough power to run Africa, Europe and parts of Asia. The current production from Inga Gorge is around 1.6 gigawatts. There's currently in play a project development strategy to take that to 4 gigawatts. Okay, so this plate's going to say what I've already said, but let's get there anyway. The official number from the IFC is 940 thousand tonnes of copper. The unofficial number takes into account the small-scale miners, around 10% of production, pushing it through 1 million tonnes of production. Have a look at that production curve, how it's grown. In 2002, the IFC, the World Bank, got together with the DRC government and introduced a new mining code. Its aim was to invite and initiate with investment community so as to get the results of driving economy. In 2010, 50 cents in every dollar of resource development that was spent in Africa was spent in the DRC. In 2010, 50 cents in every dollar that was spent in resource project development was spent in the DRC. Of course, that's why the number's so big at the end of the day in 2013. The interesting byline here is that over $1 billion a year is sent to central revenue as tax paid by the copper mining operations within the DRC. Tax regime. It's not enormously different to what you would see in many jurisdictions. Marginally better. That's all it takes. Projects in our sector are driven by the availability of funds. Funds are about a risk assessment, and there's people in this room that have got far greater depth of knowledge and assessment than I do on such matters. But the DRC, I think, has got the equation right. "14 processing facilities have been built in the last 8 years. These processing facilities, of course, result in production of in excess of the 1 million tonnes. Most of the facilities are solvent extraction electrowinning, applicable for oxide ore. So we're just at the surface, the top 100, 130 metres of ore bodies. There's two primary types of mineralisation occurring in their own two structures. We see structures that are bound within one lithology unit, and they flow as a secondary enriched copper mineralisation and oxidise, and they can flow for kilometre after kilometre. At the far end of the plate at the north there, you will see that Kamoa exists. Kamoa is the size of London, and it's a flow that's around 10 metres thick, runs at 2.5–3% copper, and has an extent of 70 square kilometres by 70 square kilometres. Sorry, 70 kilometres by 70 kilometres. Elephant country. Tenkafugarumi, 100+ million tonnes of copper at 2.5%, currently operating at 200,000 tonnes of copper production. Subject to the availability of electricity, will go as far as 1 million tonnes of copper per year. These are big operations. The thing that I find most exciting about this jurisdiction is it's a very low cost for development. The average cost of development for copper operations at the moment is around $25,000 per tonne of copper. Okay, a little bit about what we've done in Tiger. I went to Livingston conference back in 2011, and the head of resources for Raymond James out of the US was a keynote speaker. At that conference, he said, after analysis over the last 30 years, the average time it takes from first drill hole to commercial exploitation is 11 years for a resource project, where that resource project gets up. Okay, in the light of that, in 2006 we entered into a contract of works, commenced drilling in January 2007. We had a meteoric discovery of a very significant high-grade portion of the ore body at Kipoi Central through 2008, and we were able to complete a feasibility study and have that fully funded at the back end of 2009. Why was it fully funded? The internal rate of return was in excess of 100%. We built the HMS. It took us 8 months. So by 2011, in May, we were in production. By 2012, the $27 million of exploration, the $34 million of development expenditure had all been repaid to Tiger Resources. We have 6 years from signing a contract to actually seeing a dividend yield return to the shareholders. In 2013, we initiated with the building of our solvent extraction and electrical wind processing facility. This is applicable for oxide gold and uses electricity and acid and turns copper ore into cathodes. 4.5 nines. 99.999% is our target, but 995 is where we expect to be able to sell our product. We are in the next quarter going to complete the development of that facility, and that'll mean that it'll be built within 14 months. That's going to be the fastest built SXEW on the African continent, and there's been 3 SXEWs built at this dimension, at that speed, anywhere in the world. This is what can be achieved in Africa in today's market. A little bit about Kipoi. We picked up these concessions of 55 square kilometres of mining licence and secured that in 2010 after the prospecting licences and feasibility study was completed. One of the key things that is a differential between what we deal with in Australia and what we deal with in Africa is the duration of environmental permitting requirements. The interminable 3 years of process of consulting that occurs within an Australian context. We collect the data, we prepare a study, we complete a feasibility study. You might spend $25–30 million on top of your exploration expenditure, and then you sit on your hands for 3 years waiting for the bureaucrats to do their thing. That doesn't happen in these African states because the African states recognise they can't wait to have the income stream that this industry can generate for the state. So they put in place procedures and practices that demand that the processes are completed in a timeline. 3 months after we submit our EIS, we have an assessment on whether it's approved or not. If approved, the Minister of Mines has 1 month to then determine whether he will reject the application for the mining licence or not. Invariably, because of the economics of these projects and the drivers within the state, they approve to proceed to mining. So the process is a 15-month process as opposed to a 3-year process in Australia, and a 3-year process is actually the approval process, and you must collect a minimum of a year's data to comply with International Banking Consortium Equator Principles compliance. Kipoi. Kipoi Central is the heart of our mineralisation. As you can see there, it sits in the middle of it. We have a 12-kilometre structure. That's a Roan 4 structure. In Roan 4 you have copper mineralisation that crosses lithological units, and as a result you get varying grades of mineralisation and beneficiation and enrichment through secondary placement of mineral within the oxide zone. We think Kipoi Central is a floating section of the Roan 4 structure which is dominated through Jadira to the north and Kaleba to the south. It has a repetition of perhaps 5 times within the concession. 4 of them are blind. 1 of them expressed itself at surface and was crawling with small-scale miners back in 2007. In 2008, we all saw the copper price take a dive. It was no longer commercially exploitable by hand picking. They all left. We converted a mining licence before they came back, and we had a legal right to say, please do not come back onto the site. And that was enforced by the local police. La Patience is a grassroots exploration concession, and at Laputa we have 168,000 tonnes of copper in a resource. We have completed a feasibility study and we're in the process of converting that licence, 140 square kilometres, to a mining licence which will give us 25 years of secured tenure, provided we start development within 3 years. Okay, why was it that we could get going so quickly? Back in 2007, the middle of the year, we hit on the rich zone within Kipoi. We drilled 50 holes. Each one of those holes intersected mineralisation in excess of 7% copper over 100 metres. So every hole that we drilled was 5,000 tonnes of copper. That's 250,000 tonnes of copper as a central high-grade core, which is what we've been exploiting in our first phase of operations. Can everyone see those numbers? No, I didn't think so. Well, the first plate says 145 metres at 4%. Within that, 115 metres at 3.3, 150 metres at 5.8, 125 at 7 metres, 109 at 8, 88 metres at 8, 42 metres at 8, 88 metres at 3.6, giving us phenomenal deliverable. That's $500 per tonne dirt. Last year we had a meteoric month, best month of production through the HMS. We were feeding the processing plant with 14% copper for 2.5 weeks. Okay, the open pit. This is the stage 1 open pit. It's currently 15 metres away from being completed. We will finish that in May, but don't fear. If you look in the background, you see stockpiles. Those stockpiles currently contain in excess of $1 billion worth of copper. We have taken $1.8 billion worth of copper out of this open pit. $800 million of that has been sold as concentrate. The rest is being held over as a feed for the SXEW. I can see by the looks on your faces why. We found that when we did the economic assessment for running the heavy media separation, which is a gravity separation, that if we increase the cut-off grade to 3.25%, we increase the head grade, and that increases the density differential between the limestone rock and the ore, and that gives us a better overall recovery. So we did it, and so our cut-off grade is 3.25%. Gives us a low-grade stockpile of just over 3 million tonnes at 1.1%. That's the low grade. Okay, this year's guidance, 51,000 tonnes of copper production, sub $1. That's made up of two components. The HMS, heavy media separation plant, 39,000 tonnes. Yep, our operating costs for that's going to be 30 cents a pound. We stopped mining in May. Thereafter, it's 20 cents a pound, it's 48 cents a pound for the first half of the year, 30 cents a pound on average. With the SXEW starting in the second quarter, we expect to have 12,000 tonnes of production this year, and the operating cost of that, no mining once again, and the result of that is that it's 72 cents a pound. When we add in the delivery costs for the copper, we're under $1 delivered copper. So that's our C1 costs. All-in costs are under $1.50 a pound. We're the fourth largest copper producer on the ASX, and we're the lowest cost copper producer by a margin of in excess of 50 cents on a C3 basis, an all-in cost basis. The critical issues. We've done a lot of learning in coming into the DRC. Yes, I've been working in Africa for 25 years, and yes, I've built 9 operations throughout Africa at various levels within organisations, being large or small. But one thing that stands true in all cases is that you need to understand your country and their attitude towards the industry sector. You need to understand the bottom-up community and what their position is with regard to the mining. And invariably what I've found in Africa is the attitude is, if it means employment for my children, education for my children, better health issues for my children, then we're for it. Yes, we have an obligation under OECD to comply with FPEC, free, prior, informed consent. before we develop any operations. And indeed, we meet that obligation head-on by having consultative processes with our local communities through to the central government at all levels of government. You need to know your partner. Quite often in these jurisdictions you don't have 100% ownership. You need to understand their fiscal weaknesses, their commercial drivers, and you need to understand their desire to see you perform. One of the issues that we've had with our joint venture partner is that we embarrass them. They have not been able to deliver on projects in anywhere like the sort of time frame that we have, and they constantly are asked the question by the government, why can't you do what Tiger has done? So we have to deal with those issues as well, managing that. Policies, top-down policies are driven by bottom-up attitudes. Communities drive in a young, democratically elected government of 2 terms the policy positions. Those policies sometimes can be dictatorial rather than consultative and miss the point of what the local community is seeking. It's our job is to balance between what the local communities seek as outcomes and what the policy positions dictate as outcomes. By example, the Governor of Katanga Province has stipulated that any mining company, international or domestic, must have a 500-hectare farming lot with commercial farming. This is to provide food security in Katanga. The consequences of that is that they have a 1.5% inflation rate, while the country has got a growth rate of 8.7%. So you're seeing a wealth creation within the community, cost of living remaining flat while everyone is stepping up the curve. This is a good initiative, but the local community doesn't actually see any real benefits from that other than their foodstuffs doesn't change in price. They don't get an employment benefit, etc., etc. So the key from the company's point of view is to take that initiative and turn it round and bring it back so that the community gets involved in development of that 500-hectare lot, and that 500-hectare lot is then driven by the local community and they have a long-term sustainable project that can be driven through. Okay, public consultation, absolutely critical, from low level to high level. Know your consultation requirements, know who's who within the local community. It's Africa. There's chieftaincy as well as political structure to deal with. Must be aware of these things. Fulfil your promises. Sounds easy. It never is. Make sure you're clear about who can make promises and that those promises can be made. With the SXEW coming online, we've found that the local mining environment has embraced the future potential for us to expand our operations. We've had 2 companies approach us in the last 3 months asking us if they can toll treat their material through our processing facility. We have enough feed for 11 years through our processing facility. The sort of quantum that we have got with these 2 offers that have been put on the table to us would take us to over 26 years. That puts pressure on us to expand our operations. Looking at the commercial opportunity inside of this equation, simply by taking a toll treatment position, we can expand and have a 1-year payback on doubling the size of our processing facility. Sounds easy. Dividends. 2016 is our target date to deliver dividends to our shareholders. Exploration versus acquisition. I'm sure we're all aware that financing for junior explorers has become very difficult over the last 18 months. The consequences of that is that acquisition of pounds of copper is currently on par with the cost of discovery for a pound of copper. And I'm sure similar equations can be placed in all metrics. That means that we have a constant challenge to look at acquisition versus exploration. I find it quite interesting that when I talk to leaders in the industry on M&A side, that there has been quite a flat M&A activity, given that this has been the metric that is pervasive out there. and be supportive to the local community. Listen to what they want and deliver on that. We've built schools and we've built social facilities, clinics, education, training, TAFE facilities within the local communities. Total expenditure, a couple of $100,000, not a lot in $300 million that we've taken off the table in the last 3 years. We've paid tax, and over $100 million of tax has been paid as well, and we continue to grow our business. Okay, why Africa? Why am I there? I love the place, clearly. I believe that in Africa you can have accelerated shareholder returns. There is the opportunity to see those returns delivered. Had a discussion with a member of the community on this and said, oh yes, but you've got this petty corruption and you've got these issues. In my companies, we have rejected outright facilitation. We've rejected outright any form of corruption. We have driven the business hard and drive the government to deliver. There is jurisdictional areas where it's difficult to avoid, and dare I say it, under French African states where you have a hardo as the overarching commercial legal framework, it actually is very much cleaner than if you're in a British legal framework. So therefore, I argue for accelerated shareholder returns. Accretive, high returns. The deposits are at surface. The grades are higher. The development expenditure is on par with First World. In fact, one of the cries I hear quite commonly is, what about the infrastructure? At Kipoi, we have a railway line that goes to the Angolan ports that sits between the pit and the process plant. We have 3 220 kilovolt lines providing export power out of the DRC within 6 kilometres of the plant. We have a sealed road within 6 kilometres of the plant. We have a water supply within 6.5 kilometres of the processing plant. I have telephonic communication on site using my Australian mobile phone. It is through the resource sector that we will see the unlocking of the potential of Africa. I believe that we have an obligation to see Africa promoted to be all that it can be through the 21st century, with a population of 1 billion people, age less than 20 years. If we do not affect effective commercial economic development, then we're going to have the burden of being able to support Africa from the back end of this century. And that, I think, is something that we need to consider when we are looking at where we are working. Unlocking that potential gives these people their means, their self-respect and their self-reliance. People I worked with in Ghana in 1987 are now international consultants working on projects throughout the world, delivering. These were graduates back in those days. Finally, it's not just about the money. Healthy children come from what we deliver. Infant mortality in the DRC is in excess of 275 deaths per 1,000. Through the initiatives in Katanga, the infant mortality has been reduced to less than 50. So, thank you very much.
Well,